Is this not like the coolest shirt ever, the sickest Jim Pump cover ever? Pretty damn cool if I say so myself. But what we'll actually be discussing today is The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. This is really funny that this is the first full Brandon Sanderson book that I'm reviewing because Brandon Sanderson was who got me back into fantasy again. Fall 2020, I started the Stormlight Archive, bought the three fat mass market paperbacks that were out at the time, and did 100 pages a day for 6 weeks straight, knocking those babies out. And I kind of feel bad it's taken me this long to cover any of his solo material that was not Wheel of Time because he is one of my favorite writers. And the stories he tells are well worth reading. I have to say, just right off the bat, if you're wondering if this book is a read, it is. But you have about five, six other books to read before this. And then there could be more books to read if you want complete context, but at least six other books to but at least six other books to but at least six other books to read before this. I'll give a little non-spoiler review of the series that is Wax and Wayne, the second era of Mistborn, but overall most of this review will be spoilers because it was a finale book and there are some shits to talk about. But before we get into the review, I want you to allomantically coin shot that like and that subscribe buttons, and let's get into it. Starting off with, what the hell is Wax and Wayne? It's not the moon cycle, it's two dudes who are detectives out in the roughs. Out in the roughs, starting in book one, is essentially the Wild West. Now, if you have not read any Mistborn, you may say, Wild West? I thought this was a fantasy book review. And that's because there is a previous era. There is something called Era 1 of Mistborn, which I recommend you start with, where it is much more fantasy. The whole scope of Mistborn is to essentially go from medieval-like fantasy all the way to sci-fi all in one series. Very ambitious, very fun, and so far very well done through 7 books. Era 1 of Mistborn is an absolute recommendation, and Era 2 is a bit lighter if you find that heavy both in page count and tone. Although there is a lot of emotional stuff, which I'll get into in the spoiler part of this video, it is funnier, it is more focused on the humor and the novelty of the time, but that does not lessen the impact of the character writing one bit. I would say that it's much better in a lot of cases in Era 2, and the nuance of the humor mixed with those deep emotional themes definitely shows through. Mistborn Book 1 was one of his first ventures into fantasy, and you can definitely see the growth within the writing as you move into The Lost Metal. It's like 20 something or more years later since the publish of the first Mistborn to this one, and you can see improvements, which is great to see in an author that plans to be writing 50 plus books in an interconnected world. So my recommendation is start with Era 1. A little synopsis of it is essentially a post-apocalyptic world where the bad guy won. There's the ruling class and there's some slaves, and then there is the big top dog Lord Ruler. And then it's a heist story of how the hell do you steal the most valuable resource on the planet from that guy without getting absolutely murdered. So give that a shot. I think it's one of the best intros to fantasy. One of the biggest things I would say I like about Mistborn is the action scenes. The unique magic system really lends to some cool ass set pieces. In Era 1, it's all about power, brutality, and just killing people in really visceral ways. And Era 2 is a lot more finesse, and it all adds up to be a unique experience, and I'm excited to see what the action looks like in Era 3, as the powers evolve as you go on. The magic system is not static. But now time for non-spoilers for people who've read the first 3 books of Wax and Wayne, but not The Lost Metal. The Lost Metal, I would say, is tied for my second favorite book of this second era. Unpopular opinion, but I really love Shadows of Self. I thought that was one of the most snappy, well-paced, and well-put-together books Brandon has written. I know it's not that popular for other people, but I really like it. And The Lost Metal matches a lot of those emotional cues, but does them better, I would say. The cat is hitting at my door, and I hope it stops doing that because it probably sounds through on the audio. But back to the topic. It's all about wrapping up these characters. The world does not get wrapped up, I'll tell you that much. As I said, it's going all the way to the cyberpunk. This world feels like it's not even done with this era, but these characters have some finality to it. Some of them do not, and I really hope there are more books written with them in the future, but I'm not going to keep my hopes up. There is this extremely snappy pacing in the story that is conducive with the rest of the Wax and Wayne series. Of shit just gets right down to business. There's no meandering. There's no 500 pages of Stormlight where you're just discovering the characters. It is right there. And that was really refreshing after coming from Malazan, which is all about going deeper and walking farther. Putting that tangent aside, I really enjoyed the urgency in this book. And then when it slowed down and explored the characters' thoughts and emotions, it felt much more impactful, because in this tense moment, in this time where it is essential to get moving, to get this done, and when they just sit back, I'm thinking of one specific moment, and just talk with each other, all the foreshadowing comes through and pays off, or at least the foreshadowing sets up all the point until the finale where it pushes over and you get your conclusion. I would say Brandon Sanderson is a pretty heavy foreshadower for the most part, but what this leads to is the payoffs you're looking for. I will say the vast majority of the books I've read, I got the exact payoff I was looking for. It's heavy-handed, but you're never really left disappointed in what comes through. Now, moving on to spoilers for the Lost Metal, I'll start with Wax. First off, I have to say, The Sword of God is one of the coldest titles in any book ever. I do not care. Being called the Sword of God and then loading and clicking your revolver and flying off a building, that is why I love fantasy, because there's just some shit you can't have in real life that gets the blood pumping. But Wax had a pretty subtle conclusion to this book, and his establishment kind of happened in the previous 3 books. This book was all about him just being who he is. It was conflicting with being the lawman and being the senator and being this, that, and other, the husband. And he's like, I can do it all. Why can I not have a multifaceted life? And it was done in a more subtle way. There was no huge aha moment in this book for Wax, which I really liked, because the previous 3 books were much more focused on him and his character development. One of my favorite things about Wax is he is just better, not stronger like Vin in Era 1. He is just better. I love how he operates. He is like a veteran. He's like, aha, I know how to coin shot here, there, do this. The fight scenes are written so well, you can see his ingenuity and experience working. He outsmarts his opponent, or just simply does something that they cannot through practice, skill, and established lore. I appreciate this a lot, because if he was just winning through the ability to shoot quicker, it would not feel earned. I feel like all his victories over whoever it is are earned through his smarts and his ingenuity in battle. I will say I really didn't care about his doppelganger. Wayne's was much more interesting, especially for the emotional payoff and the dichotomy going on with Wayne's own character development. So I think that could have used a bit of work. Maybe if it was the mayor himself in Trone and it's like, you're fighting against what I'm trying to do. Something that was like a direct mirror of him, but over in Bilmine, it just did not feel impactful at all. I did like how he took down Wayne's doppelganger and Wayne took down his. That was a fun little switch up, because yeah, they know each other's fighting styles best. They protect each other's weaknesses, so why would they not be able to exploit that? I also love that they did not drop the detective. It's all about solving stuff, and yeah, he may not be the quickest, most genius character ever written, but he's methodical and he knows what he's doing. And even at the end of the book, he's still in detective mode, trying to solve things like the whole Malwish situation. And I want more of that. I wish this era wouldn't end. I'd love to see Wax as a full Mistborn taking on the Malwish with the Bands of Mourning or something. It just doesn't feel over yet, despite what happened. But moving on to Wayne, I really like the callbacks to his mom's story. This is kind of what I mean by heavy foreshadowing. You know what's coming when he's like, I'm not the hero. You're like, okay, Wayne's gonna be the hero. He's gonna be the one to sacrifice himself in the end. But I don't mind that because it worked really well in the establishment of him having more control over his powers through having more money and more ability to practice with Bendaloy. I have to say, that fucking money gag was hilarious every time it happened, or when the guy in the suits were chasing them and Wax was like, remind me to check my wallet. All of these moments where they're like, God, he's poor, he's stealing, why is he doing this? And he's literally the Warren Buffett of the Mistborn universe. But the way it was all written to where Wayne is gobbled up by the Mesa and spit out into being dead, but he saves the day and he becomes the hero. And I think that was the right note to end it on, because Wax got what he wanted most and what he was lacking most, and Wayne got to redeem himself from what he did out in the roughs. Yeah, he'd solved all these crimes, he'd done all these things with Wax, but it was with Wax. At the end of the day, he had to do something himself. Yes, he was forgiven. Yes, he'd changed as a person, but that was his decision to be the hero, and it truly cemented that he is a completely different person than the one who shot that girl's father. And as usual, his humor was there, it was on point, and a fellow never regretted giving it two shakes. But on a more serious note, his relationship with Marasi as like a detective and partners there, I don't really care for it. I like Marasi and I like Wayne, and together it should have been really cool, but I don't feel like we had enough time to really sit in it and feel the disconnect, because he just automatically went over with Wax and started working together again like it was old times. And Marasi talked about it a little bit, but I didn't see the impact on either of them. Like, they should have adapted a bit over those 6 years to rely on each other in these certain situations. And going back to, for Marasi working alone and Wayne with Wax, should have been really weird for them. They should have been relying on each other's abilities and been like, oh shit, do not have that right now. But speaking of Marasi, I liked how she stuck to her convictions of wanting to work for the people. Yeah, she could help the people a lot if she had these secrets and she didn't tell anybody about them, but she wanted to be transparent. She'll get less done even as governor of Ellendale, but she stuck to what she thought was morally correct. And that was a great point, because that was her character through and through. I wanted her to join the Ghost Bloods, but it would have been the wrong choice for her. I do wish there was more back and forth within her internal conflict. It kind of went like, oh, but then I wouldn't be able to tell the people about all those secrets. Ah, shucks. Oh well, guess I won't do that. I felt like there definitely should have been some pros and cons weighing in her mind and been a lot harder of a decision. Something else that I don't feel like went completely correct with Marasi was her whole insecurity thing. I think that was really well done in the previous books, especially with Wax denying her, but there was so much to do in this book. I feel like a couple more chapters and pages could have been devoted to fleshing those out and reminding us, because when it came down to the rioting moment where she was like, oh, I've just been dealing with this. Yeah, it sucks, but you gotta push on. It didn't really feel that earned. Like the governor getting absolutely dumpstered, love that. But for her, I felt like there needed to be more. There needed to be more instances where even as a super successful detective and policewoman, she had those insecurities in this book. It just did not feel set up quite enough there. The pool of Dor was pretty anticlimactic. Dor is the power source from Cell? Yeah, that's the one. The one with Elantris and Emperor's Soul. It was pretty anticlimactic. I wish a couple of the soldiers had come through and maybe killed some Alamancers to really show the threat. Because it was essentially like, okay, everybody, put your hands in this pool and suck that shit up like a Capri Sun. Ta-da, we're good to go. And I was really wanting more from that whole entire plotline, because it was split in two. Big ass rocket gonna blow up Ellendale. This is the immediate threat. Smaller scale than like what it was in the Mistborn Era 1, but the really big threat is complete invasion by Autonomy's forces. And this should have been the bigger threat. This should have been the huge thing, like in Era 1 when Ruin was trying to kill Preservation, but it just didn't feel big enough. It did not feel like a big enough threat. And so the payoff there and the whole entire moment was just kind of, yeah, they got it done. Let's get back to Wax and Wayne. But something that might be interesting if we do revisit some of these characters in Era 2 are, what are the long-term effects of having that much investiture just ran through your system? Is Marasi now just like permanently supercharged just an extra bit? We don't know. Excited to find out. I really hope there are more books in this era too, because it does not feel complete, or the time jump is less time than what was it, 100 or 300 years between the first and the second. But moving on, we have Steris. Steris was exactly what she needed to be. She was a complete book character. She found her place. She's no longer extremely awkward, and I love that she's a disaster planner, just perfectly fitting into the story and being exactly who her character has established to be. Moving on to like some of the more broad world things, the Malwish did not play that big of a part. I get that there's a ton of eras to come and you have to save some stuff, but you introduce the Malwish in the last book. Huge thing. Oh, you're talking about all these tensions and conflict, and all they do is scheme the Bands of Mourning, which was pretty forced and pretty heavy-handed and kind of out of nowhere. That one was a little less set up than I would have liked it to be. And then they had no influence on the finale. I definitely thought the bomb was going to be on the Malwish ship. It just seems so obvious of, oh, Bilmine is the big port between Malwish and Elendel Basin. And then they're like, oh, this airship comes in. How are they ever going to get the bomb to Elendel? And it's like, it's a boat. And finally, we have the set. I liked how they were desperate. I liked how they were fighting for their own survival and the survival of the planet, and not just this all-powerful, mysterious, spooky organization. They had their own conflicts and shortcomings within this book, and I preferred that a lot more than just having them be the evil bad guys who are controlled by Trell and autonomy. Speaking of Trell, Wax's sister, who I'm blanking on the name of, was pretty disappointing. I love the turn in the last book and her just completely betraying Wax, but this book, she just felt way dumber than she was set up to be. I like the whole Wax being a completely different person than the one she knows, and him using that was super smart and well played out. But she just took L after L after L in this book, and there was really no threat from her. I was never scared of her. Like, obviously, yeah, you know the good guy's gonna win at the end of this book. But in the meantime, you don't know who's gonna die, what plans they're acting against our main character's plans, the schemes and machinations of somebody who's supposedly so smart. There was an opportunity here, and I feel like this book just needed an extra like 150 pages for the Marasi stuff and setting up Wax's Telsin, that's her name, Telson's to be smarter and more schemy. I know this whole book's run on a deadline, but I feel like we could have gotten more and more intricate plans. Like there were 6 years, they were doing bomb testing, all of this, that, and the other, and their only preparations were doppelgangers of Wax and Wayne. That just does not feel like the secret manipulative genius that she was set up to be. There was also all of these other Cosmere connections. I won't go too deep in them besides what was in this book because I don't want to spoil other Cosmere books. But Rockman, we haven't seen him or his powers in the Aethers. That's really cool and interesting. You're probably wrong. We probably have seen him, his powers, and the Aethers before. And Moonlight, I feel like we know who she is if you've read a certain short story by Brandon. And I feel like that's the most obvious answer for me. But then she turned into one of the people from Elantris, and now she's just gallivanting through Scadrial, all powerful and godlike, just throwing door everywhere. So that's a whole nother plot line that I want to see. I just believe that the Ghost Bloods are going to become more and more a part of this entire Cosmere and kind of the guiding hand. This book, it felt like they were on the back foot. They were more vulnerable than they are in something like Stormlight. I guess that's kind of a spoiler, but not really. They're not that involved in Stormlight. I really want to see more of Kelsier and his brother Death. What's his name? Marsh. I want to see more of Kelsier and Marsh. I feel like those are fun interactions because Sazed, I am done with. Harmony is just annoying and dumb and absolutely useless. Yes, I get that's the whole point, but like, oh my God, can you really do nothing but send a dude with a gun? All right, I don't have much else to say. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this review. Let me know what your thoughts about the Lost Metal are down in the comments. We kind of have a little Brandon binge coming here because I'm now doing the secret projects too, so be prepared for that. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this review, and I'm out. See you guys.